Afternoon, everybody. A little bit of an impromptu seasonal changes live this time. I wasn't sure if I was going to have time to fit it in today, and then went, oh yeah, actually I will, and it means let me just adjust that slightly. There we go. It means that I can get the fibre dyed today. I'm out competing with Nelly at a scent work competition tomorrow, but I'm hopefully back in the afternoon. So all being well, the fibre might be in the shop either on Saturday afternoon or on Tuesday afternoon, or if not Tuesday afternoon, I've got lots of new fibre ready for a shop update on Wednesday. Some of it I've dyed this morning, some of it I dyed yesterday. So that's exciting. One of the reasons I wasn't sure if I was going to manage to get everything done today, to manage to sort of do a live stream, was because I've been busy getting everything sorted so that US customers can carry on buying fibre exactly as they've always done. So I had to do some fiddling about with stuff at the shop, making sure that, like, I understood all the stuff that's sorted, but it's all sorted now. So yeah, so it's now all set up so that US customers basically pay the equivalent tariff price to me, and then I pay it to Royal Mail when I send their parcels. But it does mean that you can just carry on ordering fibre exactly as you've always done so, which is really good, because actually some of my US customers have been with me for absolutely ages. Some of them were buying fibre from me back in 2011, which is when Hilltop Cloud started. So I would have been absolutely heartbroken if they'd have had to stop shipping to the US permanently. As it turns out, because I went away on holiday for a week at the end of August, I never actually turned off my US shipping, because I was just like, I'll sort it all. I'm sure there's going to be a way to sort this all out when I get back. And lo and behold, there was. So the couple of orders that were placed that I couldn't ship out because Royal Mail actually turned off shipping to the US until they got the duty paid option ready. I just sent those out a little bit later. But enough of crazy economics. I'm going to shut this window just because, or at least pull it to slightly. That'll stop a bit of the traffic noise that you might be hearing. Because it's been wet and rainy here today, and there's big lorries going past on the road. It's just meaning that it's a little bit noisy sounding. So let's make sure that you can hear what I'm saying. But our seasonal changes this month is this one, which is chrysanthemum. So it's some rich reddy oranges, but there's a really nice kind of greyed blue to go with it, which I think is going to be, it's a really nice accent to pop off the other colours. And what I really liked about this one is it's got some lovely tonal variation. There's some beautiful lights and darks, which always makes for a nice colour palette for using for fibre work, because we're so reliant on having those lights and darks, not just contrasting colours and everything else. So let's get cracking. Let's get this dyed, because I've warbled on for 3.5 minutes and haven't actually done anything yet. So I am going to start off with doing that bluey grey colour. I also managed to upend an entire bucket of water all over the floor of my studio. So it's slightly messy back there because I'm just trying to make sure all the mats dry out before I put them all back down again. But yeah, so if you're new here, welcome, because I don't always do it at this time slot. So there might be some of you that have never managed to make it along to one of these. So I always say these are never, it's not a tutorial, it's not me teaching you how to do this. It's my verbal spewage of my random thoughts as I'm creating up these colour palettes. You get a little bit of an advanced look about what the colours are going to be like, and just a little bit of a behind the scenes look at everything that goes on in the studio. So first up, we have got this bluey grey colour. So I'm just going to pull off some of the larger quantities of the colours that I know that I'll need, and then we'll use my little syringes to measure out small amounts, because these colours are repeatable. So it's important I know how much dye I've used in order to be able to dye them again throughout the rest of the month. So let's just make sure. So I'm going to start off with that greyed blue, and it's kind of one of the mid-tone colours. So I've put in a mixture of some grey and some blue. It's gone into that. And let's get my piece of kitchen roll out. So this is just so I can get a sense of what the colours look like. It's never perfect because these are, it looks different on the kitchen roll than it does on the slightly yellow fibre, and it always looks darker here than it does spread out onto the fibre. But allows me to kind of feel if I've got the sort of colour right. Let me pull that shade back up again. So that's what I've mixed up using some turquoise and some grey. I'm actually going to put a little bit more grey into that. I'd just like to mute it down a little bit because I think that's going to end up being a little bit turquoise heavy once the dye is actually on there. So I've just put a little bit more grey dye on there. That's better. Happier with that. There we go. I'll hold it up so you can see the change that's just made. So it's only slight, but that bottom colour was the original shade. This is the slightly modified one. Again, on the screen it might not show up massively, but it's just made it a slightly greyer tone, which is more how it is in the colour palette. It's not now quite so turquoisey. It's a little bit dark. Yeah, it's a little bit of a better colour. Right. All the other colours are reds and oranges and yellows. So we're going to start off with the very, very darkest red. So this colour, so we've just dyed that one. So it's this colour here. And this one is the darkest colour in our colour palette, so it's the colour that's going to need the most dye going into it. So let's have 1, 2, 3 of you. I've got enough brown dye in there. And 1 of you. Write that down before I forget. So it's got some reds, and then I've used just some brown just to mute the colour and knock it down a little bit. What I might also do, looking at this, is it might also end up with a tiny bit of black in it. So that's the red that I've just dyed. It's slightly more purple toned in the inspiration picture. So I'm just going to grab another tub. I don't need a full measure of black from my large scale measuring dispensers, because obviously when I'm prototyping the colours, I'm not using as big a quantity as dye as I would be if I'm dyeing sort of proper big dye lots. So this black is actually a very purple toned black. So we'll just put a tiny bit of black in it. That's better. So original was on the bottom, which was just red and brown, and then I've just added a little bit of black into it just to mute the colour down ever so slightly. I might see how that dries, of whether it has any more black going into it, whether I want to make it any darker. Right, next one, we've got another red shade, and this one is actually slightly pink toned red, but it's still going to have that, needs to be slightly more muted than just something I would make using a red and a pink dye. Let's grab, yeah, so I'm trying to make decisions, and I've got post-lunch brain fog, I think. Right, I definitely want that much red. What I'm not sure about is what else I'm going to put in here. Pull off. I don't think I'm going to want a full measure of this pink dye, because it's very, very bright and intense. So let's go 10 of that. So that's made kind of like a cherry sort of red, but I just want to then make it a little bit more muted. What I don't want to do is put too much brown into this, because otherwise it becomes too similar to the other shade of red that I've just dyed. But I have still put some black in there. Hopefully not too much. Let's have a look and see. Let's put a little bit of water in this, because this will need to be... So this is a mid-tone, so it had roughly half the amount of dye in it. That's less than half, maybe a third amount of the dye in it as the darker red. So it is going to be paler because there's less dye gone onto there. So even though it looks darker here, it is going to be a paler colour. And I've also made sure it's a different tonal colour as well. So this is more a kind of raspberry cherry type shade, as opposed to like this maroony winey colour. So it's probably not quite where we're at with the inspiration pick. I'm going to see how I feel about that one, as to whether I do. I think to most match the inspiration pick, I think it would need some brown in it. But I think I'm going to deviate from what the inspiration pick has got, because I think it's going to give us a better colour palette that would be more useful and give us some better contrasts. So that's kind of my thought process with that. Right, next up we have got the two yellow colours. So the mid-toned yellow is very roughly the same tonal value. It's fractionally lighter as that pinky colour that I've just used. So I'm going to use roughly the same amount of dye, and that's going to mean that it is a nice mid-tone. It's probably if I was to put it into grayscale, this yellow and this blue would be roughly the same shade of grey, I suspect. So it needs to have a reasonable amount of punch to it, but I need to make sure that the very pale yellow is pale enough to be contrasting. So we're going to start off with our yellow. So this is a very warm toned yellow. And then it also has something in to make it slightly shifting towards orange. And it's also going to have a little bit of brown go into it. So that's my brown. Now these always need more brown in than kind of you think, otherwise they end up being too yellow. Let's start off with that much, and I can add more in if I need to. And then let's just pop a little bit of this pink in just to warm it up a little bit. And then dilute it down with a little bit of water so I can see what it's going to be like at the sort of colour intensity that is going to be on fibre. Okay, so, right. So that's where we started off. That's too yellow. It's nowhere near orange enough. It needs a lot more of the pink tone going into it. So I only put 3 in. So I'm going to put in another 5, so that will make 8. Let's have a look, see where we go. That's better. So that's the original one, and then that's the version with slightly more pink in. So it's just made it a slightly warmer colour. Have a look. Maybe wants a tiny bit more brown. It's quite a muted colour. Let's take that up to 8 as well. And that now means it needs more pink going in. 8. Let's put in another 2, make it 10. always think yellows are some of the hardest colours to kind of end up getting the colour balance right. Right, so we're now here. I'm going to pop these all on a fresh bit of picture roll at the end so I can properly compare what they all look like. But that's more what I was after. So you can see how the original one was far too yellow. That one was nice, but it's a little bit too bright. This one here was when I added some more brown in, but that then made it not warm enough. And then this is when I added a little bit more of the pink. So I'm going to leave that for a moment and I might come back to it. So finally, we've got this little peachy terracotta colour. So I'm going to start off with this pink again. So this is going to be the palest colour. And I'm going to add some brown into it. Dilute that down. I'll show you where we're at there. So this is going to need some yellow as well. Because at the moment, it's a very pretty sort of dusky rosy colour, but we're after something that's a little bit more apricot. So it's the shade that's right by my fingers, this one here. So it needs a little bit of yellow going in. So let's put some yellow off. And I need a measuring syringe. That with there. And get rid of that air bubble. And write that down so I don't forget. Okay. There we go, that's not bad. Have I now made it too yellow? Let's have a look. Yes. I'm just going to add one more pink in there. If I've got enough dye left in there. I'm sure I must have. Now I'll just have to pull some more off. It's just enough. So again, I don't want to make it too dark because otherwise, because this is the very palest colour in the colour palette, it needs barely any dye. That's better. So, right, here we go. So that was the original one with no yellow. That was with the yellow added. It's made it to orange coloured, and then I've just added some more pink back into it. Right, let me grab another couple of bits of kitchen roll so I can actually show you what this looks like overall. And we can just do a run through double check of how the colour palette looks. Right, let's move all of you to one side for the moment because you are all done with and you're just getting in the way. I shall need you later because that's citric acid, and you can come out the way as well. Right. So, very palest colour. No, that's the blue that I want last. I'm trying to put them out in the same colour as the swatch because it then helps make it feel more like the colour palette picture looks. So that's where we're at. Let's take a look at it compared to the colour palette. So we've got the blue I'm pretty happy with, that red I'm happy with, that pinky shade actually I really like that. I think it's slightly paler than in the inspiration picture, but I think that's going to mean it contrasts better with the other shade of red. That yellowy colour, I think it maybe wants a little bit more brown in, but I don't want to make it too muddy. And the peachy colour I think is quite nice. I think the peach colour, that apricot dusky colour, works quite nicely. What what's going on with that shade. I think it might need some more red going into it. I think it's just ended up. I'm going to use the pink just because I've kind of used it all the way through the rest of the colours. I think if it just has a tiny bit more pink going in, it's going to stop it being too aggressively yellow. That's better. Much happier with that. So I've just added a fraction more of the pink, and it's just made it slightly more orange toned, and I think it just is, it's less mustardy coloured. I think it's a better colour for the warm and rich tones. Like somebody when they chose the colours over in the Fellowship of Yarn went, oh, those are such real rich intense shades, and I kind of don't want to have the yellow be too mustardy almost. It needs to be quite a warm, it's almost verging into orange. Right, we're ready to put some of this dye onto the fibre. So yeah, so as you can see, it's part of mixing up the colours is experience. Sometimes I'll get the exact colour balance right first time round. Sometimes it's a little bit of trial and error. Sometimes I deviate away from the inspiration picture because I think it will work better in fibre form. It's also about making sure we've got the right balance of lights and darks in the palette as well. So wool went into soak before I went and had some lunch. So it's normally I do it overnight, but it's sort of 45 minutes is it's absolutely fine. Particularly this sort of wool, it gets wet very easily. So I've just squeezed out all the excess moisture so it's damp but not dripping. So this wool is Cambrian wool, which is a cross between Welsh Mountain and Blue-Faced Leicester. So they're technically known as Welsh mules, because a Blue-Faced Leicester cross with any hill breed sheep is called a mule. They are the shearling fleeces, so they're from the first time that the animal is sheared. So they're at the finest. So they're before the sheep have had any lambs. So the sheep have had nothing to do all year except to grow fat, grow very nice fleeces. They haven't had to have the pressure of being pregnant and feeding a lamb, and that keeps the fleece grade really, really nice. So it's quite long stapled, it's got quite a high lustre. So this is our dusky grade blue. So I'm just trying to make sure that it's reasonably even. With these colours I don't mind there being a little bit of tonal variation because they are hand dyed, not commercially dyed. They're not dyed in the fibre and then processed into comb top. But at the same time, we don't want big, massive changes as the colour sort of is being spun. So that's our blue. So remember, these always look darker at this stage because of the way that wet fibre reflects the light. They will lighten up once they're dry. Yeah, so once these are done, these all need to go and be heat set. So they're acid dyes, they require a temperature about 80-90 degrees in order to make a bond onto the fibre. So the dye molecules attach onto one of the sites on the fibre, and they're a protein dye. So that's why they work on wool, they work on silk, They wouldn't work on anything that's cellulose based, so they wouldn't work on cotton, on rami, on bamboo, on linen, on anything like that. They have a different sort of dye, and they require slightly acidic conditions in order to work. So that's what the clear liquid that you saw me putting on top was. So that's citric acid. So it's just lemon juice in very concentrated form. It's the same stuff. It's sold. I actually get it from a company that mostly sell it for people making bath bombs, because it means I can buy it in bulk for a not too horrific price. So this is our dark ready brown. So that just needs our citric acid going on. Catch. So just going to make sure that's evenly all the way on. So people always say, often